Welcome back, guys. This is Josh, and you're watching Catholic Cop. Okay, welcome back. This is part 3 of our 3-part series. The first part was The Proof of God by Thomas Aquinas. Second part was the proof that Jesus was a living, breathing person. And finally, we've got to the crux of Christianity, the great thing that us Christians hang our hats on, and that's the proof of the resurrection. Now, why is this important? Well, it's important because if the resurrection never happened, then this is all made up. This is all a big fake. I'm a phony. The Catholic Church is a phony. Everything is fake. But if it's true, everything in our lives hinges on this truth. The way we act, the way we behave, the way we conduct ourselves, what value we put on certain things in life, everything hinges on this very truth. If Christianity is true, if Jesus really did rise from the dead, then that changes everything. It changes everything. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to take the 5 biggest objections to the resurrection and build a defense against those objections. And I'm going to let you, the viewers, decide whether it suffices. Okay, so the first objection to the resurrection that people often go to is that the resurrection is a made-up, fabricated story after the fact. A lot of people will argue that after Jesus died, his apostles created this story of the resurrection to validate their faith, to validate the things that their teacher told them that he was going to be resurrected. And a lot of people say that after he died and they say he didn't rise from the dead, that they stole his body and created the story of the resurrection. So let's break into this first one. Was the resurrection story a fabricated lie? Okay, so my first point that I want to bring up, if this was a lie, if this was all made up, the 12 apostles are in the upper room and then they're devising a story, they're devising a plan to make this all seem like it really happened. Who would be the number one person you would cite to notify the authorities that the body was missing, that Jesus' body was missing? Well, the person you would probably choose that would give credibility to your story would probably be somebody of influence. Now, somebody of influence in Jesus' era would probably be somebody in the form of a Roman citizen, or even better, a Roman centurion, a senator, a governor, some kind of political figure, but definitely a Roman man, because women at the time didn't have any legal rights. They weren't even allowed to testify in court. Women were as discredited as children's testimony. So if we're making this story up, we would use a Roman man as the person who would discover the empty tomb. Now, as the Gospels have it, it wasn't a Roman man. It wasn't even a man who discovered the empty tomb. It was Mary of Magdala, Mary Magdalene. She was a woman. And not only a woman, but a woman with a very bad reputation. A lot of people would say that she was a prostitute or a harlot. So she's the least credible person that you would put at the front of this story as finding the empty tomb. She'd be the last person you would put as the person discovering the empty tomb, because she's the least credible person. So if this was fabricated, that was a terrible choice of a person to use for the discovery of the empty tomb. So for that reason, it can only be true. It has to be true. What they wrote about was exactly what actually happened. Mary Magdalene went to the tomb of Jesus on the third day and found the stone rolled away and two angels seated inside of the tomb. So the first point that this resurrection story was all made up goes against it, because if it was all made up, they would have chosen a better person to notify everyone that the tomb was empty. The second point that shows that the story was not made up and it was factual is because when the gospel writers wrote about this, they portrayed themselves as cowards. They were very honest and forthcoming that they ran away at the moment of the crucifixion. Judas hung himself afterwards because he was stricken with so much guilt. John, James, Bartholomew, all of these apostles scattered to the winds. That doesn't paint them as heroes. That paints them as cowards. The only one that stuck by Jesus of his disciples was John, the youngest of all of them. Now, if you were creating this false narrative that Jesus was resurrected, and you had the flexibility to paint yourself in a positive light or a negative light, you would more than likely give yourself more of a positive spin to the story, and not that you are a coward which ran away and was hiding in an upper room during the resurrection. So the second proof that the story is true is because the gospel writers were very honest in how they conducted themselves during the time of the crucifixion and the resurrection. The third point to show that the gospel writers were true in what they wrote, and this was not a fabricated lie, is that people just don't die for something that is made up. People don't go and be burned alive, impaled, crucified, beheaded. They don't allow those things to happen to themselves if what they're protecting is just a lie. At least one of them would have cracked and spared their own life to say, okay, I made all this up. Let me show you where the body is. But that doesn't happen. 11 of the 12 apostles are martyred. They are killed for their faith. Now, people don't die, don't willingly die for a lie. Now, finally, the fourth proof that the gospel writers were true in what they wrote, that Jesus was in fact resurrected, and this was not a made-up lie, is from St. Paul, the writer of probably 80% of the New Testament. In 1 Corinthians 15:6, Paul cites 500 people that witnessed the resurrected Jesus Christ. He doesn't cite one or two people. He cites 500 people. So what he's saying is, look, if you don't believe me, there's 500 other people that you can go talk to. Now, as a detective, it is really hard to get that many people to maintain the same lie. What we typically do is, if we have multiple witnesses of something, is we separate them all. We put them all in different interview rooms. That way we can interview each one at a time and find inconsistencies amongst all their testimonies. Now, one or two people might be able to keep a lie between the two of them, but it would be really, really difficult. It would be impossible to keep a lie amongst 500 people. And that's exactly what Paul is telling us. He's saying, look, you don't have to listen to me. You don't have to believe what I'm saying. There's 500 other people that are willing to testify to the same thing that I'm testifying to. Go interview them for yourself. And I think that's fantastic, especially for people that are truth seekers, that don't want to take the faith that was given to them by their parents. They want to seek out the truth for themselves. And I think that's fantastic. I think it's a great strategy. I think most people should do that, because nothing's more powerful than something that is self-actualized. Now, the second objection that's typically brought up about the resurrection is people say that Jesus' followers stole the body of Jesus and hid it somewhere else. So here's what I have to say on that. One, the tomb was heavily guarded by Roman soldiers. There's no way they would have allowed Jesus' body to be stolen. And let's say there was a rebellion. Let's say that Christians went to the tomb with the intention of stealing the body. The Roman soldiers would have sent notice back to the city of Jerusalem because Jesus was buried right outside the city. They would have sent soldiers to the city to say, hey, we're under siege, send reinforcements. Christians are here trying to steal the body. But that never happened. Another point is Jesus received an honorable burial from Joseph of Arimathea. Now, Joseph of Arimathea was very influential. He was part of the Jewish Sanhedrin, which is part of the elite Jewish leadership. Joseph of Arimathea gave Jesus a tomb that has never been used before, from a member of the Sanhedrin, which is a very honorable burial. Now, another point to be had about that, since Jesus did receive a very honorable burial, Jesus' followers wouldn't have stolen the body because they would have believed as Jews that Jesus would have been resurrected at the general resurrection at the end of time with all of mankind. So how would they have treated the tomb of Jesus with the body inside? Well, it would have been a pilgrimage site. To this day, if Jesus' body was laid to rest in that tomb, it would have millions of people flocking to that site every single day. And it does. Jesus' tomb is a pilgrimage site. We do know where he was buried. The body's not there, but it's still a pilgrimage site nonetheless. But imagine if the body was there. The Jews would have no reason to steal the body. One, they wouldn't have been able to steal the body under a Roman guard. Two, Jesus received an honorable burial, and the Jews that were following Jesus would have waited for Jesus to be resurrected at the general resurrection of all mankind. And three, Jesus' followers would have been using that site as a pilgrimage for their teacher. It would have been a site where all Christians to present day would go to see the body or to be around the body of their teacher, their master, their Lord and their Savior. So Jesus' followers had no reason to steal the body. Okay, so you may be asking, okay, maybe Jesus' followers didn't steal the body, but maybe the Jewish elite did. Maybe the Jewish Sanhedrin that conspired to have Jesus crucified, maybe they stole the body. Well, to that answer is absolutely not. They wanted nothing to do with the crucified Jesus. Their goal was to squash Jesus and to squash this story of the resurrection. So, if they did have the body, as soon as the story of the resurrection happened, as soon as Easter came and the tomb was empty, and there's a story of the resurrected Jesus, the Sanhedrin would have produced the body to squash that and say, no, he was not resurrected. Here's the body right here. He is still dead. But they didn't do that because they never stole the body. And they wish they had the body so they could say that he wasn't resurrected. But they don't have the body because they didn't steal the body. And finally, what about the Romans? You could argue that the Romans stole the body. Well, to that I would say absolutely not. Because the Romans conspired with the Jewish leadership, the Sanhedrin, to make sure that Jesus was crucified. Why? Now, if you remember reading in the Gospels, that Pontius Pilate only wanted Jesus crucified because he was fearful of this Jewish rebellion. Pontius Pilate knew that if the Jews rebelled and a skirmish broke out in Jerusalem, that Caesar could punish Pontius Pilate for that rebellion. So Rome wanted nothing to do with Jesus. That's exactly why they posted guards outside of Jesus' tomb, was to make sure this didn't happen. So if the Romans did have the body of Jesus on Easter morning when the tomb was found empty, they would have produced the body and said, here it is. There's no sense in fighting about this. There's no quarrels here. Here's the body. So Jesus' followers had no reason to steal the body. The Jewish Sanhedrin certainly didn't want the body. The Romans wanted nothing to do with the body. But yet, the body is still missing. And that leads me to my fifth and final point, is that here we are 2,000 years later, and we have the best archaeologists and the best historians in Jerusalem, and yet Jesus' body is still undiscovered. We know where his tomb is, but his body to this day, 2,000 years later, is still undiscovered. Jesus' body was resurrected. It ascended into heaven and is seated at the right hand of the Father. So how do we know Jesus was resurrected? How do we know Jesus was divine? Because when he said he was going to do something, he did it. When Jesus said, I will be raised on the third day, he was raised on the third day, and the evidence points towards that. God bless everyone. Thank you. If you like this video, like, share, subscribe. It does a lot for the channel. It gets this channel out of obscurity, and it'll put it on other people's feeds so more people will be able to hear this message. So please like it, please share it, please subscribe to the channel. Once again, thanks for tuning in. This is Catholic Cop.